This will sound very strange, but the famous actor Sean Connery was 007 James Bond, as well as the voice of the dragon in the movie Dragonheart, and starred in the movie The Rock. And Sean Connery's acting career is a prophecy that is predicting that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash that will be caused due to a bird strike in St. Louis on precisely January 31st, 2023. The date that this video is posted proves that this prediction was made ahead of time, as does this timestamped email and forensic notes PDF. If you are skeptical, please email me and I will forward these to you. It is also predicted that famous actor James Earl Jones, the voice of the Lion King and the voice of Darth Vader, will die on April 11th, 70 days after it is predicted that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash. At this time, there is zero news regarding James Earl Jones's health. Here is the email and forensic notes PDF document that prove that this prediction was made ahead of time. Some of the videos on this channel have a few minutes of introductory information that is the same as other videos. This particular video has over 50 minutes of introductory information, and if you have already watched this 56 minutes of information, you can skip ahead to minute 56. After Harris's death, she will be replaced by Michelle Obama, and soon after, Barack Obama will replace Michelle. This is the reason why Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash. It is so that Barack Obama can become the president again. It is predicted that Michelle Obama will very soon become the 47th president, and soon after that, Barack Obama will become the 48th president. In the Bible, a goat is symbolism for the Antichrist. In pop culture, goat stands for greatest of all time. Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash after her plane's engine will suffer a bird strike. As a result, the GOAT Antichrist will come to power. The GOAT of college football coaching died at the age of 61 and was born in 1961. The GOAT Antichrist was born in 1961 and will become the president again and the Antichrist at the age of 61. Coach Mike Leach won 84 games with the Texas Tech Raiders, and this year when he died at the age of 61, his team had a record of 8-4. The GOAT Antichrist was born on the date 8-4 in 1961. Kamala Harris is the 49th U.S. Vice President. 49 days hints at the 49th Vice President, which is why the 49th Vice President will die 49 days after the GOAT of college football coaching died. Coach Mike Leach was famous for his revolutionary air raid style of offense, and he was also famous for coincidentally coaching the Texas Tech Red Raiders. The name Air Raid hints at a bird strike of Kamala Harris's airplane. The Air Raid coach died 96 days after the Queen of England died at the age of 96 as a result of Kamala Harris's death in a plane crash due to a bird strike. Michelle Obama will become the Queen of America. Michelle Obama will return to the White House as a result of the 49th Vice President's death in a plane crash due to a bird strike that will be 49 days after the death of the Air Raid coach, which in turn was 97 days after she returned to the White House for the unveiling of her portrait on the date September 7th, which is 9/7 and hints at 97, because 97 is the 25th prime number, and the 25th Amendment will be used to make her the president, and then the 25th Amendment will be used to make her husband the president again. Michelle Obama will replace the 49th U.S. Vice President and then become the president as a result of the death of the 49th Vice President in a plane crash caused by a bird strike, which will be 49 days after the death of the Air Raid coach. And this was in turn exactly 49 months after her book Becoming was released, because she will become the president. Michelle Obama will become the first female president and the 47th president as a result of Kamala Harris's death in a plane crash that will be 49 days after the death of the GOAT of college football coaching, the air raid coach, which in turn was exactly 47 weeks after the death of Lucia Harris, the queen of basketball, who was the first and only woman to be drafted by the NBA, and Michelle Obama will replace Kamala Harris, the first female vice president, and then become the first female president, the 47th president, and her husband is the basketball president. The death of the GOAT of college football coaching, the air raid coach, which hints at the bird strike of Kamala Harris's airplane, died exactly 1,109 weeks after the air raid on the Twin Towers and the Pentagon on 9/11 in 2001. The number 1109 hints at 110 and 9. God pairs the numbers 110 and 9 together to point to the 110 floors of the Twin Towers that collapsed, and George Washington's walk down Wall Street after his first inauguration at Federal Hall, and into the church that was the only building at Ground Zero to have survived the falling debris, due to the uprooted sycamore tree that sheltered and protected Trinity Church. In God's judgment warning to ancient Israel in the book of the prophet Isaiah 9:11 says that the buildings have collapsed and the sycamore trees have been uprooted. In what today is known as the Miracle Chapel, George Washington consecrated the nation to God, saying that if the nation were to ever turn away from God, it would lose its divine protection and blessings. Wall Street is named after the 9-foot-high wall of security that the Dutch built to keep the British and the Indians out. And in the Bible, Joshua died at the age of 110, and he led the Hebrews around the walls of security before they collapsed in God's judgment. And Joshua and the Hebrews crossed the Jordan River into the Promised Land on the date 110 in the Hebrew calendar, which hints at the number 110. God pairs the numbers 110 and 9 together to symbolize all of this. And Joshua is a type for Jesus, and Jesus' first coming was officially on the date 110 in the Hebrew calendar. 2 towers that were each 110 stories high is symbolism for Jesus' second coming. That God pairs 9 and 110 together to point to 9/11 is the reason why the iconic Air Force plane in the collapse of Afghanistan on the prophetic 20th anniversary of the collapsed 110-story buildings on 9/11 was number 1109, which hints at 110 and 9. Barack Obama will become the president again as a result of the death of Kamala Harris in a plane crash, which is predicted to be 49 days after the death of the air raid coach, which was exactly 1,109 weeks after the air raid of the planes into the Twin Towers on 9/11. Barack Obama will become the president again as a result of the death of Kamala Harris in a plane crash, which is predicted to be 49 days after the death of the air raid coach, which was exactly 90,011 days after the nation was born on July 4th, 1776. America will lose its independence 90,011 days after it established its independence. 90,011 days hints at the judgment warning for the nation in 2001 on 9/11. It is now believed that Kamala Harris's plane will crash on her return flight from Los Angeles to Washington, D.C. And although it was learned in October that her crash would be in St. Louis, it was discovered in December that a flight from her home in Los Angeles in California across the country back to Washington, D.C., this flight path will cross directly over St. Louis. It was also realized that her plane crash in St. Louis will parallel the book of Isaiah chapter 31, verse 4, And because I used to have a friend that lived in St. Louis, I recalled that the area code for St. Louis is 314. Isaiah 31:4 says that the Lord will come down like a lion and a young lion that is growling over its prey, and like birds hovering. In the movie The Lion King, there is a lion and a young lion, and it is believed that the Lord will bring down, Kamala Harris's airplane will come down as it is flying over St. Louis due to turbulence, which will parallel the lion and the young lion growling in Isaiah 31:4. Turbulence will be symbolism for a lion's roar. A lion's roar is air vibrations, as is turbulence. As a result of this lion's roar turbulence, her plane will attempt to make a landing in St. Louis, at which time her plane will be struck by a hovering bird. James Earl Jones, the voice of the Lion King, is symbolism for the lion's roar. In the Bible, a lion is symbolism for Jesus Christ. It is predicted that James Earl Jones, the voice of the Lion King, will die on April 11th, the calendar date that Jesus was crucified on, and this will be 70 days after it is predicted that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash due to turbulence, which is symbolism for a lion's roar, in St. Louis, a city that is connected to by the I-70 highway, and over which passed the path of totality of the Great American Eclipse, which was 70 miles wide. And astronomers calculate eclipses and the path of totality of eclipses using the number pi, which is symbolized by 3.14 and hints at Isaiah chapter 31:4. Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash in the city with the area code 314 after her plane experiences turbulence, which is symbolism for a lion's roar. And 70 days after this, it is predicted that the voice of the Lion King will die, and this will be on her flight across the country, a flight path that goes over St. Louis. And the I-70 highway, which goes from the west coast to the east coast, and the 70-mile wide path of totality of the Great American Eclipse, which are paths that cross the country, hint at Kamala Harris's flight path across the country. This video is also predicting that there will be a catastrophic asteroid hit on Earth on September 2nd, 2023. This will be a fulfillment of what is described in the book of Revelation in the Bible in chapter 8. Currently at this time, there is no way of knowing where Kamala Harris plans to be on January 31st. But if her plane crash occurs in St. Louis, then another video on this channel that is titled Prediction Harris's Plane Will Crash in St. Louis will become one of the most important videos on this channel. Once this prediction comes to pass, you should know that you need to watch every minute of every video on this channel, including every Kamala Harris prediction video and James Earl Jones prediction video. There is specific and unique and important messages from God in each of the videos. However, arguably one of the top most important Kamala Harris videos is the 1989 World Series earthquake prophecy video. I have also titled this video Church of Philadelphia Signs. In the description box below, I will leave links to these videos. It has been known since the autumn of 2020 that she will die in a plane crash. But as can be seen here in this email, it was known since August of 2021 that God was pointing to the date January 14th, 2022 in regards to Harris's death in a plane crash. The majority of this video was produced before January 14th, 2022. Prior to January 14th, 2022, the Lord was pointing to this date with an overwhelming amount of evidence through connections to other signs that involved symbolism for the death of Kamala Harris in a plane crash, which is why prior to January 14th, 2022, it was assumed that this would be the day that Kamala Harris would die in a plane crash due to a bird strike. However, instead, it turned out that January 14th, 2022 was a day of prophetic signs that confirmed all of the analysis of the signs and connections that were pointing to January 14th in regards to the death of Kamala Harris in a plane crash. It turned out that January 14th was another important step in the trail of signs that is ultimately leading to the day that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash. On January 14th, 2022, we received two amazing, profound prophetic signs that are explained in one of the most important videos on this channel and must-watch American Pharaoh Prophecy video in each of the mountain states, Colorado and Utah. This is symbolism for the high places. Jesus said he saw Satan falling like lightning from heaven. The name Barack Obama in Hebrew means lightning from heaven. Barak is the Hebrew word for lightning. Bama is the Hebrew word for high places. And in the Bible, high places is a metaphor for heaven. For example, in the book of Isaiah, it is said that Lucifer fell from the high place, a metaphor for heaven. Also in the Bible, the high places is a euphemism for the false religious worship that the Jews would do on the tops of mountains. Hence, again, why these two signs in the mountain states. The word for from in Aramaic, the language Jesus would have spoken, is O. Hence, Barack Obama is lightning from heaven. Either Jesus didn't know what he was saying, or he knew that there would be a famous president named Barack Obama and said this anyway, even though it would confuse us, or he was revealing the identity of the Antichrist. The word Bama, which again means the high place, is H1117 in Strong's Hebrew Old Testament Concordance. H1117 also hints at 11 and 17, and the Antichrist is described in the book of Zechariah in chapter 11, verse 17, where the Antichrist is called God's worthless servant. This is why, for example, Barack Obama released his A Promised Land book on the date 11/17 in 2020, for example. Also, Colorado was the 38th state to join the Union. And Colorado is where Barack Obama had his Democrat National Convention and received the nomination for presidential candidate in 2008. This was in Mile High Stadium in Denver, the city that is a mile above sea level and is the highest major city in America, the high place. The 38th president, Gerald Ford, was the only president to never have been elected vice president or president. He was appointed instead, and the reason why Colorado, the high place, is the 38th state is to point to this and how Barack Obama will become president again, through being appointed instead of elected. When Kamala Harris will fall from the sky in her plane crash and then be replaced with the Antichrist, this will symbolize when Jesus said he saw Satan falling like lightning from heaven. 11 months and 17 days hints at H1117, the word for high place. And this is why it is 11 months and 17 days from January 14th, 2022, the day of these prophetic signs in the high places, which includes an airplane crash onto the top of a warehouse of a company named Mountain Foods, to December 31st, 2022, the day that Pope Benedict died. The thing that Pope Benedict is most famous for is being the first pope in 600 years to resign from office. Within minutes of him officially resigning, lightning struck St. Peter's Basilica at the Vatican twice. Lightning struck twice within minutes of Pope Benedict's official resignation. This connection of 11 months and 17 days that symbolizes when Jesus said he saw Satan falling like lightning from heaven was known many days ahead of time before Benedict died, and this connection to prophetic lightning. The reason Benedict resigned was due to old age and his ability to carry out his duties as pope. This is the very reason that Joe Biden will resign from the president's office. The reason God has placed Joe Biden in the president's office is because he is old and is losing his mind, so that he will resign and allow his old pal, Barack Obama, to become the president again. Barack Obama in Hebrew means lightning from heaven. When Benedict resigned, lightning struck the Vatican twice. The name Benedict hints at Biden. The first letters of Benedict give us Benede. If we simply rearrange a couple of letters, we get Biden. This is by God's design. The reason that Harris will die in a plane crash is so that Biden can appoint Michelle Obama and then resign. This is why the death of Pope Benedict, who famously resigned, is a prophetic sign that points to Harris's death in a plane crash, which will be on the 31st of January, 31 days after the death of Benedict on the 31st of December. The reason for this is because, as explained earlier, Harris's death in a plane crash will point to the 31st chapter of the book of Isaiah in the Bible. The other reason for the involvement of the Pope in these signs that are pointing to Barack Obama is that in Bible prophecy there are two antichrists. These antichrists are described using a metaphor of a beast, and the second beast gets his power from the first beast. The first beast is Pope Francis, and Barack Obama, the second beast, will get his power from Pope Francis. This is why, for example, on the same day that Pope Benedict died was the day that the disastrous flooding began in California, which began with disastrous flooding in San Francisco. And this is 44 days, which hints at the 44th president, before this Super Bowl, in which it is predicted that the San Francisco 49ers will win. Make sure that you watch the 49ers Bengals video on this channel. Kamala Harris will fall from the sky. She will fall from the high place. And this connection that connects January 14th, 2022 to December 31st, 2022 is enough of a confirmation to know that Kamala Harris will fall from the sky in a plane crash on January 31st. However, God was not done with his big picture of signs through which he is telling many stories. And so there are other ways in which January 14th connects in a trail of amazing, profound signs to January 31st. I will now present a brief synopsis of some of this trail of signs that connects January 14th, 2022 to January 31st, 2023. Prior to January 14th, 2022, I had learned that God was also pointing to June 7th. One reason being is that it is 144 days after January 14th. I knew that if January 14th were not to be the day that Harris would die in a plane crash, then it would be expected that there would be a prophetic sign involving the number 144 on January 14th. Sure enough, we received an amazing prophetic sign involving the number 144 on January 14th, as was expected in advance. This prophetic sign involved 144 horses. The explanation of this prophetic sign, other signs that occurred on January 14th, and many, many other extremely profound things are explained in the must-watch American Pharaoh prophecy video. The American Pharaoh prophecy video is essential information, especially regarding the prediction for Kamala Harris's death in a plane crash. In the description box below this video, I will leave a link to the American Pharaoh prophecy video. The number 144 is prophetic because of the prophetic number 144,000 in the book of Revelation in the Bible. The prophetic sign on January 14th involving 144 horses confirmed adding 144 days to reach June 7th, and the relevant prophetic signs that occurred on that day, including an announcement from Kamala Harris, the 49th Vice President, regarding America's border wall of security. In the book of Joshua in the Bible, the Hebrews marched around the walls of security of the ancient city of Jericho for 7 days before they collapsed in God's judgment. On the 7th day, Right before the walls collapsed, 7 Hebrew priests blew 7 trumpets that were made from horns of bighorn sheep. This is symbolism for 7 times 7 equals 49. June 7th was the 7th day after park rangers at Joshua Tree National Park closed its 49 Palms hiking trail in order to provide bighorn sheep access to water. The hiking trail is symbolism for the Hebrews' march around Jericho, and June 7th was the 7th day of its closure, which symbolized the 7 days that the Hebrews marched around Jericho in the book of Joshua. And then on the 7th day blew trumpets, which were made out of bighorn sheep horns. This trail, named 49 Palms, is near Los Angeles, the hometown of Kamala Harris, the 49th vice president. And at this time, she happened to be in Los Angeles for the 9th Summit of the Americas. The number 9 is the most important number in God's big picture of signs, as from the Bible, it symbolizes God's judgment. The prophetic signs that occurred on June 7th, the 7th day of the closure of the 49 Palms Trail in Joshua Tree National Park, included her big announcement regarding funding for the border wall of security crisis, and also the big news story about the biggest ever caravan of immigrants that were headed to the border wall of security. All of this is Book of Joshua symbolism, and much more regarding these signs will be explained in the Absolute Must-Watch January 6 Public Hearings Prophecy video. The Hebrews blew trumpets before the walls of security collapsed in God's judgment, and a big part of Trump's election campaign and presidency regarded his border wall of security, and this is why the January 6 public hearings regarding President Trump commenced in June of 2022 at the time of these prophetic signs that were symbolism for the book of Joshua. God uses 188 days, weeks, and months connections, as the 188th Hebrew word in Strong's Bible Concordance is the word meaning woe! In the Bible, this word is used in context of extreme judgment from God. As well, the number 188 is symbolism for the 9/11 judgment warning, as the second plane that hit the second tower 17 minutes after the first plane had a crew of 9 people. 17 divided by 9 equals 1.88888. On 9/11, a third plane hit the Pentagon, and the only other time in history that a foreign enemy attacked the nation's capital was exactly 188 years earlier on 9/11 in 1813, when the British landed on Washington's Mount Vernon estate and then proceeded to burn down the White House and the Capitol building. God chased the British out of Washington, D.C. that same day with a hurricane. On June 1st, 2022, park rangers at Joshua Tree National Park closed the hiking trail named 49 Palms. This was 188 days to the amazing prophetic signs that occurred on December 6th that were related to the upcoming death of Kamala Harris in a plane crash, including the death of Kirstie Alley, who began her career in Hollywood in the movie Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, and this was to point to the strike of the USS Enterprise by another Starfleet ship. Just like on 9/11, U.S. planes were used to strike the Twin Towers and the Pentagon. The scenes in the movie Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, involves Khan's wrath, which is symbolism for God's wrath, hitting the Enterprise starship and disabling its engine, which hints at the disabled engine of Kamala Harris's Air Force Two plane due to a bird strike. Khan disguised himself in the USS Reliant starship and struck the USS Enterprise, and Starfleet starships resemble birds. The Wrath of Khan was a bird strike. As will be explained in another video, the Star Trek sign on December 6th pointed to its theme song at the beginning of Star Trek TV episodes that involves trumpets and scenes of the USS Enterprise speeding through space. The song begins with a trumpet call, it includes trumpets, and it climaxes with a woman's soprano voice and a symbolic shout, which parallels the book of Joshua when the Hebrews blew trumpets and in the climactic moment shouted before the walls of security collapsed in God's judgment. In the book of Joshua, the Hebrews marched around the walls of Jericho for 7 days, and then on the 7th day they marched around 7 times while 7 priests blew 7 trumpets. This was 7 followed by 7 times 7. And in fact, this parallels the Omer count, which is 7 days followed by 7 times 7 days in between the Feast of Passover and the Feast of Pentecost in the Hebrew calendar. The death of Kirstie Alley on December 6th pointed to Star Trek, which pointed to its theme song, which is a trumpet call that climaxes with a shout, which points to the book of Joshua, which regards a 7 days count and then a symbolic 7 times 7, which is why from the death of Kirstie Alley that pointed to this, it is 7 days and then 7 times 7 days to the date it is predicted that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash on January 31st. Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash 7 days and then 7 times 7 days after the death of Kirstie Alley that pointed to a strike of the USS Enterprise by another Starfleet starship, and Starfleet starships resemble birds. And this strike is symbolism for a bird strike of Kamala Harris's airplane 7 days and then 7 times 7 days after the death of Kirstie Alley, who starred in Star Trek. 7 days after Kirstie Alley died was the day that the GOAT of college football coaching died, and in the Bible, a goat is symbolism for the Antichrist, and in pop culture, GOAT stands for greatest of all time, and this coach is famous for his revolutionary style of offense named Air Raid, and the death of the Air Raid coach is more symbolism for the raid of Kamala Harris's plane by a bird, and the Air Raid coach died 7 days after Kirstie Alley died, which pointed to Khan's raid of the USS Enterprise, and the air raid coach died 7 times 7 days before it is predicted that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash due to a bird strike. The 49 Palms Trail in Joshua Tree National Park was closed in order to provide access to water for bighorn sheep. The trail was reopened after there was heavy rains and serious flooding in Joshua Tree National Park on August 8th. Similarly, this flooding caused closures of roads and park entrances to the park. God warned Noah that the flood judgment would begin in 120 years. This is why the prophetic signs that occurred on December 6th that revealed that the 49th vice president will die in a plane crash occurred 120 days after the flooding in Joshua Tree National Park, where the 49 Palms Trail is located. In the book of Joshua, the walls of security of the ancient city of Jericho collapsed in God's judgment after the Hebrews marched around the walls 7 times and blew 7 trumpets, which hints at 7 times 7 equals 49, and this is the symbolism in the name of the hiking trail that is 49 Palms, that is in Joshua Tree National Park. The hiking trail is symbolism for the Hebrews' march around the walls of Jericho, and the trumpets the Hebrews blew were made from bighorn sheep. In archaic English, the word trump means trumpet, or the sounding of a trumpet, which is why President Trump's presidency was synonymous with his border wall of security. This is also why on the same day as the flooding in Joshua Tree National Park and the reopening of the trail that was closed for bighorn sheep, the FBI, which is working for the spiritual enemy, breached the perimeter walls of security of Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate. It was symbolism for the collapse and breaching of the perimeter walls of security of the ancient city of Jericho by the Hebrews after they blew trumpets. Again, in the book of Joshua, the Hebrews marched around the walls of security of Jericho for 7 days, and the 7th day of the closure of the 49 Palms Trail in Joshua Tree National Park was the day of the prophetic signs that occurred on June 7th. On the 7th day, 7 Hebrew priests blew 7 trumpets, which is 7 times 7. 7 times 7 days, which is 49 days, after June 7th was the day of the closure of the I-70 highway and 70 rescues by firefighters in the extremely prophetic, historic, and destructive flooding in St. Louis that pointed to the 70-mile-wide path of totality of the Great American Eclipse that passed over St. Louis and peaked right near St. Louis and ran parallel with the I-70 highway. In the book of Revelation, the book regarding end times prophecy, the number 144,000 is a very prophetic and prominent number. This number 144,000 is symbolism for the faithful followers of Jesus that will be rescued and will not go through the period of tribulation and the Antichrist. Instead, they will not die, they will disappear. It is called the rapture. The word for rapture in Greek in Strong's Concordance is the 726th word, G726. And the date of this flooding in St. Louis occurred on the date 726, which hints at this, as it was Noah's flood symbolism, and Noah and his family were rescued in the ark from the coming flood judgment. This is why from this flooding on this date 726, it is 100 days, which is the equivalent of 144,000 minutes before the prophetic signs that occurred on November 3rd that revealed that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash in St. Louis on January 31st. And these signs on November 3rd include the rollout of NASA's Artemis 1 spaceship, which is a ship, which is symbolism for Noah's Ark, and it's a mission to the moon, and the moon symbolizes Christ, and it is Christ that will rescue God's faithful in the rapture. And in the account of Noah's flood, God gave Noah a 7 days warning to load the ark before the flood judgment, and this extremely prophetic rollout of NASA's Artemis 1 onto the launch pad on November 3rd was 7 days before Hurricane Nicole made landfall 70 miles south of Kennedy Space Center, where Artemis 1 was sitting on the launch pad where it weathered the storm. This isn't even scratching the surface of the important and amazing information regarding all of this, and much more is explained in the 1989 World Series earthquake prophecy video, which is also titled the Church of Philadelphia prophecy video. The reason the number 144,000 is prophetic is because of the description in the book of Revelation involving 12 times 12,000. On the same day as the prophetic flooding in St. Louis, a sudden windstorm caused Class A damage, meaning 2.5 million or more in damages, to several Navy helicopters at a base in Virginia. The prophetic significance of these helicopters is explained in the must-watch NASA Mars helicopter videos on this channel. God is using helicopters in his prophetic signs as symbolism for the dragon that is described in Revelation chapter 12 that is thrown down from heaven to earth with his angels at the symbolic beginning of the end times tribulation period. And this is what Kamala Harris's fall from the sky in a plane crash will symbolize. And her crash will be a symbolic beginning of the end times tribulation period, and her crash will result in the rise of the Antichrist, for which the dragon is symbolism for. And this is why these helicopters in this prophetic sign are named Sea Dragons. These helicopters are named Sea Dragon because they hunt sea mines. And this was a part of the news story because the Navy only has 30 of them and there are no plans to get new ones. In Revelation chapter 12, God's faithful are rescued from the dragon, and these faithful are symbolized by 144,000. A main aspect of the news story on this incident states that the National Weather Service issued a severe thunderstorm alert at 3:30 p.m., with a warning of winds of more than 60 miles per hour. According to the damage assessment, the high winds hit the Navy base at 3:42 p.m., 12 minutes after the initial warning. When given enough time, aircraft in the path of bad weather are taken into their hangars or tied down. However, the storm came at a time when aviation maintainers are usually in the midst of a shift change. Most of the personnel were indoors and had limited time to bring the aircraft in the hangars. In other words, the timing of the storm couldn't have been worse, and this 12 minutes warning was key. This prophetic 12 minutes warning is why this incident is a warning from God that 12 times 12,000 minutes after this 12 minutes warning was the day of the amazing and profound and extremely important prophetic signs that occurred on the penultimate date in the Trail of Signs on November 3rd that revealed that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash in St. Louis, and that this trail continues on to January 31st. On November 3rd, which is the date 11/3, the 2022 World Series MVP hit a prophetic hit in the World Series. This prophetic hit is explained in the 1989 World Series earthquake video. On this 11/3 date, he had 11 runs in the postseason, and his jersey number is 3, which hinted at the date 11/3, which in turn hints at 11 times 3 equals 33. As well, on the date 11/3, his postseason hitting average was .333. Also, on this same day as the World Series MVP's prophetic hit and prophetic hitting average, NASA began rolling out its Artemis 1 space launch system and posted a tweet that referenced Billy Joel, who is known for his pop music hits. In his music career, Billy Joel had 33 top 40 hits. The reason for this is because God needed to point to the prophetic signs that occurred on December 6th, including the death of actress Kirstie Alley, whose first role in Hollywood was in Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, which was 33 days after November 3rd. And November 3rd is 11/3, which hints at 11 times 3 equals 33. And again, on November 3rd, we received the signs involving the number 33. The Star Trek theme song is a parallel with the Book of Joshua, and the Hebrews marched for 7 days, and this was a clue for adding 7 days to December 6th. And also, the serial number of the USS Enterprise in Star Trek II is 1701. And this hinted at adding another 17 and 1 day to get to December 31st, the day that Pope Benedict died, which, as was explained, was a prophetic sign that pointed to the death of Kamala Harris in a plane crash 31 days later on the 31st of January. As will be explained later in this video, which is the 1989 World Series earthquake prophecy video, on November 3rd, we also received 3 prophetic signs involving the number 8. The last out of the World Series game between Philadelphia and Houston, the team from Harris County, was Philadelphia player number 8, Nick Castellanos, because God is using men named Nick to identify what the Nicolaitan doctrine of our day is, that Jesus said he hates and is coming to make war on with the sword of his mouth on those that preach and have the works that are a product of this doctrine, which is Reformed theology and sovereign grace and free grace, which come in the packages of Calvinism and dispensationalism, which are literally rooted in Gnosticism from the first centuries after Christ, and which both lead to the heretical doctrine of eternal security, or once saved, always saved. This Nicolaitan doctrine of our day is also the myth of imputed righteousness, as evangelicals understand this, the misunderstanding of the Bible verse, our righteousness is as filthy rags, the theology of saved by faith alone, the doctrine of the predestination of the elect, and the doctrine of all Christians will be raptured. This will be explained more in this video, but also make sure you watch the 23 church signs video on this channel. Make no mistake, the purpose of this prediction from God for Harris's crash is to prove that what I have just said is the truth. And this is a very, very big deal. The main theme in God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel, is judgment warning for the church. Please don't think that the Nicolaitan doctrine must be the doctrine of those other churches. If you are Christian, including and especially evangelical Christians, the chances are very high that you have this Nicolaitan doctrine, this doctrine that Jesus said he hates. In other words, this prediction that is from God, this video, is a warning for you. It is a warning for Christians. In other words, make sure you watch the 23 church signs video on this channel. It is a warning for the Church of Laodicea that in the Bible is contrasted with the Church of Philadelphia. The Church of Laodicea is describing the vast majority of Christians and evangelicals today. The Church of Laodicea thinks that it is in need of nothing. If you are a Christian that thinks you are in need of nothing, for example, you just love Jesus and you don't need to know about doctrine, it is difficult to warn you, but this is a warning. Make sure that you watch the 23 church signs video. On this same day, the Philadelphia Eagles football team went to a record of 8-0 for the first time in their history, with a win, coincidentally, in Houston against the football team from Harris County. And also on this same day, the GOAT of football punting, Raiders player number 8, died. In college, he wore jersey number 44, which hints at the 44th president, GOAT Antichrist. Greek letters are also numbers, and the numeric value of the name Jesus in the Greek New Testament is 888, 3/8. Jesus is returning to rescue his Church of Philadelphia, the only one of the 7 churches he said would be spared the tribulation and period of persecution from the Antichrist. This sign was in fact a judgment warning for the church, which Jesus will cleanse through the tribulation period. In the Bible, the Feast of Pentecost is symbolism for the church. Pentecost literally means 50th day, which is why 50 days after these 3 signs involving the number 8 was December 23rd, the day of the peak of Winter Storm Elliott. Elliott is rooted in the Hebrew word Elijah, and the prophetic signs that occurred within this storm are explained in the Winter Storm Elliott video, and it was more judgment warning for God's Gentile nation, America. That day in turn is 8 days before the death of Pope Benedict, which connects to the predicted date that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash, which will be the symbolic beginning of the end times tribulation period. And this connects from the day of the 3/8 signs, including player number 8, the GOAT of punting, who wore jersey number 44, and 8 days is also 4 + 4 days. On the date 11/3, which hints at 11 times 3 equals 33, NASA issued a tweet that referenced Billy Joel, who had 33 hits. And this tweet was 33 years after Billy Joel's album Stormfront was released. His album Stormfront includes a song named We Didn't Start the Fire, and this album was released on the same day as the extremely prophetic 1989 World Series earthquake, which was known for the fires that it started in San Francisco. The song We Didn't Start the Fire is known for its fast-paced lyrics that include brief references to 118 significant political, cultural, scientific, and sporting events between 1949, the year of Joel's birth, and 1989, in a mainly chronological order. The death of Kamala Harris in a plane crash will be a significant event that will lead to the Antichrist becoming the president through replacing her during the 118th Congress, and this Antichrist will enforce what is called in Bible prophecy the mark of the Antichrist during the 118th Congress. This mark of the Antichrist is one of the 118 events that are listed in Billy Joel's song. The mark of the Antichrist is the 22nd event listed in the song. The very purpose of the prediction from God for Harris's plane crash on January 31st is to prove that the mark of the Antichrist is the 22nd event listed in this song. This is because the number 22 is symbolism for the mark of the Antichrist. In Bible prophecy, it is said that if one takes the mark of the Antichrist, they will go to hell. But if they don't take this mark of the Antichrist, they will not be able to buy or sell the food that will be rationed. The inverse of the mark of the Antichrist is described in the Bible in Ezekiel chapter 9, and it would have been the Tav mark. The Tav is the last letter in the Hebrew alphabet and is the 22nd letter. The mark of the Antichrist is described in the last book of the Bible, which is the 22nd book out of 22 books in the Bible that have a total of 22 chapters. The 22nd president was the only president to serve non-consecutive terms, as he skipped the 23rd presidency of President Harrison. Similarly, the Antichrist will serve non-consecutive terms after the death of Kamala Harris, which is why the basketball president wore jersey number 23 in high school. Billy Joel was nominated for 23 Grammy Awards, and as explained in the 1989 World Series Earthquake video, the 2022 World Series MVP's prophetic hit on the date 11/3 pointed to his college baseball at the University of Maine, which is named after the 23rd state to join the Union. The mark of the Antichrist is the 22nd event listed in the song, and if we count the event in the song that is listed as North Korea, South Korea, as two separate things, the mark of the Antichrist is the 23rd thing listed in the song. This is because in the song, the North Korea-South Korea event is a reference to the Korean Civil War between totalitarian socialists and anti-totalitarian socialists. And because the Antichrist, whose number is 23, will enforce the mark of the Antichrist as a political weapon as part of the totalitarian blue team's civil war on those that are anti the evil totalitarian agenda of the blue team. I haven't even scratched the surface of the explanation of the prophetic signs that occurred on November 3rd. These signs and so many other extremely important things are explained in the amazing beyond words 1989 World Series Earthquake video, which I have also titled Church of Philadelphia Signs Video. Once this prediction comes to pass, you should know that you need to watch every minute of every video on this channel. And arguably, the most important Kamala Harris prediction video is the 1989 World Series Earthquake Prophecy video. I will leave a link in the description box below this video to the 1989 World Series Earthquake Prophecy video. The rest of this video will be an explanation for the trail of signs in God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections that were leading and pointing to January 14th, 2022. I will not edit the rest of this video that was produced before January 14th. Instead, I will leave this video the way it is. Again, the very important explanation for how the prophetic signs on January 14th pointed to June 7th, which was part of the trail of signs that is leading to the predicted date that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash on December 31st, is explained in the must-watch American Pharaoh prophecy video. And when I say must watch, I mean it is one of the most important videos on this channel. Make sure you watch this amazing video. The rest of this video will explain the amazing and very important information regarding God's big picture of signs that were pointing to January 14th. God is telling many different, very important stories through his big picture of signs, which is why all of the videos on this channel should be watched. In the most important video on this channel, which is titled God's Purpose for These Predictions, I will explain the reason for why God has given me a voice through this prediction that is from God. You are making a very grave and serious error if you think you already know how I was able to know this prediction, and more importantly, if you think you already know why I was able to know this prediction. It would be very foolish for you to skip watching this most important video. You will have missed the point of this prediction. One of the purposes for this prediction is to establish that the main conclusions being stated in this video are fact. It is a serious warning for those that disagree with the things being stated in this video. And to not appreciate this is to miss entirely the point of this prediction that is from God, and it is to miss the point of this video and video channel. In the description box below, I will leave a link to the video titled God's Purpose for These Predictions. All right, through the death of Sean Connery, God is demonstrating a really amazing story, as I will explain in this video. God was heavily pointing to June 8th ahead of time. This, what is shown in this diagram, is just a small sample of it. On June 8th, Kamala Harris was on her trip to investigate the supposed source of the border wall of security crisis. And America's border wall of security symbolizes, and the walls of security collapsing on the ancient city of Jericho in judgment from God. And this is why Trump, God's trumpet that he uses to trumpet his signs, his presidency was synonymous with his border wall of security, because the Hebrews blew trumpets before the walls of security collapsed in judgment. And the true source of the border wall of security crisis, in fact, is America's rejection of God. On this trip on June 8th, well, her trip began with her having to make an emergency return landing to Washington after her plane landing wheel malfunctioned. And that was symbolic of her dying in a plane crash. And on June 8th, she was in Mexico. And the big news story of the day was her snide remark to the reporter that asked her why she hadn't been to the border wall of security yet. To which she replied, she hadn't yet been to Europe either, so what's your point? And this was really bad for her image. It was the biggest news story of her trip. And also, at the same time in that press conference, she announced that the U.S. would be donating 25 million doses of the VACCINE, which is the mark of the Antichrist. And this was also symbolic of the 25th Amendment that will be used after her death in a plane crash to appoint Barack Obama, the Antichrist, to replace her. But also on June 8th, actually it was June 7th, the day before, that the White House press corps plane on its way to Europe before taking off from Washington experienced a swarm of cicadas in its engine, which delayed its takeoff. And this was symbolic of the bird strike that will strike Kamala Harris's plane engine that will cause her crash. On June 8th, Biden, the news story was Biden and the cicada that it smacked into his neck as he was boarding his plane for Europe, which tied into Kamala Harris's snide remark about going to Europe. And so that was the amazing signs we received on June 8th. June 8th, 2021 was 220 days, is exactly 220 days before the day that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash. And June 8th was also exactly 220 days after the day that Sean Connery died at the age of 90. This is absolutely stunning because Sean Connery starred in the movie named The Rock. And the number 220 symbolizes rock, which symbolizes Jesus. This is why, for example, the rock that fell from the Western Wall on the 9th of Av in 2018 was 220 pounds, and why the meteor that flew over the arch in St. Louis, the gateway to the west, was also 220 pounds. The path of this meteor traced exactly the path of totality of the Great American Eclipse Judgment Warning sign, and in the Bible, judgment begins symbolically at the gates of the city, and this is the symbolism contained in the signs in St. Louis, the gateway to the west. The reason why the number 220 symbolizes rock is because G220, the 220th word in the Greek New Testament, is the word for rooster, and the rooster is the symbol for Peter. In the 9th century, the Pope made it mandatory that on top of all cathedrals was placed a rooster. Before the rooster crowed twice, Peter denied Jesus 3 times. Jesus gave Simon the name Peter after Peter had answered his question as to who they believed that he is. Simon said that Jesus was the Christ, the Messiah, and then Jesus said he would build his church on this rock. The word for rock in this context is the word Petra, the feminine version of the word, which refers to bedrock, which would be something one would build something on, a foundation of bedrock. Jesus was telling Peter that the truth that he had just stated, that he is the Christ, is the foundation that he would build his church on. Unfortunately, Catholics and the Catholic religion twists this one verse to imply that Jesus said he was going to build his church on Peter, a man, which is actually blasphemy. Just a few verses later in the same chapter, Jesus called Peter Satan. It doesn't make sense that Jesus would say he was going to build his church on Peter and then shortly after call him Satan. But the entire Catholic religion and theology hinges on this one verse in the Bible, because they claim to get the authority to create their man-made traditions on top of the Bible through their assertion that the popes are descendants of Peter. Peter was never in Rome, and furthermore, there were multiple popes at certain times in history, and there wasn't always popes from the very beginning, etc. However, this isn't what Jesus said. He said he was going to build his church on Petra, bedrock, and he called Simon Petros, Peter. This is important information, especially if you know a Catholic or you are Catholic, because Pope Francis is the Antichrist, and this prediction in this video proves this, because God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections is being explained on this channel, and the big picture of signs explained on this channel overwhelmingly demonstrates through God's signs that Pope Francis is the first Antichrist. And furthermore, there are many Bible prophecy passages that also clearly demonstrate that the Pope is the Antichrist. In other words, Catholicism is not a legitimate denomination of Christianity. Many people that aren't Catholic are confused about that as well. But if you know a Catholic, or you are a Catholic, or if you know a Catholic, memorize what I just told you, because that one verse demonstrates that the Catholic religion isn't true. Their whole entire religion hinges on that one verse. And Catholicism is the wolf in sheep's clothing. And Catholics, as will every Christian, will be severely tested in the end times through the Catholic system. True followers of Jesus are going to be forced to leave the Catholic tradition or make a choice and remain with it and go to hell. And so it's very serious. The Pope is going to announce that aliens have made him ambassador of the world. Aliens are, of course, demons masquerading as aliens. The Catholic Church is filled with supernatural experiences. They are also demonic deception. And I believe that there will be a massive Mary apparition in the end times that will fool many people in the world. And this is also demonic. All Mary apparitions in history have been demonic. All you need to do is read what they say, the quotes of what they have said, and if you understand the gospel, you will know that this is anti-Christian, all of the things that the Mary apparitions supposedly say. Another couple quick things about the number 220. There were 2 towers on 9/11 that collapsed, and each were 110 stories high. And it is a mystery, but the 2 numbers that refer to the end times and the Antichrist in Daniel chapter 8, 1,150 and 2,300, if we add 110 and 220 to those numbers respectively, we get the other 2 numbers that symbolize the end times period, which is 1,260 and 2,520. When Kamala Harris dies in her plane crash, she will then be replaced with the Antichrist, and judgment is really going to get going on America. And that's why God is communicating that she will die in her plane 2 sets of 220 days after Sean Connery died, who starred in the movie The Rock. 2 sets of 220 is 440, and in the Bible, the 440th word in Strong's Greek New Testament Concordance is the word for live, hot, burning coal of fire, which would symbolize a meteor or an asteroid, and again the meteor that flew over St. Louis on an extremely important date in God's signs, 11/11/2019, a date which contained and occurred many amazing, profound signs, and connected with many other profound signs, including 188 days exactly to another St. Louis sign, and the 188th word in Strong's Hebrew Concordance is the word "woe!" and traced exactly the path of totality of the Great American Eclipse, was 220 pounds. And again, the rock that fell from the Western Wall on the 9th of Av was also 220 pounds. And so we have 220 associated with rock. And in the Bible, 440 is associated with a live, hot, burning coal of fire, which would symbolize the big rock from the sky that will be catastrophic and a big part of the end times judgment from God. I will have more to explain regarding this in future videos, but I believe the evidence is overwhelming that this asteroid, the description in Revelation chapter 8, this asteroid hit should occur on September 24th, 2022, right before the resurrection rapture event on the Feast of Trumpets, September 26th, 2022. Now, Sean Connery also starred or was the voice of the dragon in the movie Dragonheart. Sean Connery died at the age of 90, and this was 90 days after SpaceX's first Dragon crew splashed down in their Dragon capsule. This symbolized Revelation chapter 12, when the dragon is thrown down from heaven to earth. This Dragon capsule with its Dragon crew came down from the second heaven, outer space, and splashed down on earth. From the Bible, the number 9 symbolizes judgment, and it is one of the 3 most important numbers God uses profusely in his end times big picture of signs, patterns, and connections. And the number 90 symbolizes the number 9. It is in Genesis chapter 9 that God established his covenant with man regarding judgment. And in Luke 17:17, Jesus said, "Were not 10 cleansed? Where are the 9? This was after he cleansed 10 lepers, and only one of them thanked Jesus, falling on his face at Jesus' feet. The one that thanked him was the Samaritan. That's why Jesus went on to say, "Was no one found to return and give praise to God except this foreigner?" What Jesus was doing here was passing judgment on Israel. And that's why it was 9 Jews that didn't thank him and the 1 Samaritan did. What I find interesting about that as well is that the 9 that are mentioned in this passage is passage 17:17. And God pairs the numbers 9 and 17 frequently in his big picture of signs, patterns, and connections. And for example, 90 days before this Dragon's crew splashed down was the day that coach Don Shula died at the age of 90. Don Shula was the winningest coach in NFL history, and his 1973 Dolphins team was the only NFL team to have an undefeated season. Barack Obama hosted the Dolphins at the White House, as he does with championship teams. But he wanted to do this for this 1973 team after he had done it for his 1985 Bears team. And that's another story that's explained in the must-watch Super Bowl video. The point here being is that I have watched many of Barack Obama's White House videos with his sports teams visiting him. Many of them are prophetic signs. And this is the only one to my knowledge that is an exact number of minutes. It is exactly 9 minutes, this Obama White House video on YouTube with this undefeated Dolphins. The Dolphins went undefeated for 17 games. This was a pairing of the numbers 9 and 17 together. And God pairs the numbers 9 and 17 together, for one thing, to point to and reveal the identity of the Antichrist, Barack Obama, who was president from 2009 until 2017. He also arrived in Washington, D.C. as the senator from Illinois in the 109th Congress and will return as the president in the 117th Congress, which began on January 3rd, 2021. Going back to the Dragon crew that splashed down, this Dragon crew launched just a couple of months before it at the end of May, and their first attempt to launch was delayed because of thunderstorms, thunder and lightning, which symbolized when Jesus said he saw Satan falling like lightning from heaven. The launch got canceled 17 minutes before the scheduled launch time and then was rescheduled for 4 days later. The Dragon capsule and its Dragon crew were launched on what is known as the Falcon 9 rocket. That was another pairing of the numbers 9 and 17, and it was also one of the signs involving 17 minutes. Another example was the Cubs-Cleveland World Series in 2016 that went into Game 7 and then was tied at the end of 9 innings, and then there was the famous 17 minutes rain delay. Other videos explain how extremely prophetic the 2016 World Series was. Another example of a prophetic 17 minutes sign was the infamous 17 minutes of live footage posted on social media during the Christchurch, New Zealand mosque massacre. These instances of 17 minutes are pointing to the big 17 minutes in between the two planes that struck the two towers on 9/11, 17 minutes apart. It was the ultimate second witness sign. After the first plane struck the first tower, the world watched live and was confused as to whether it was terrorism or an accident. The world watched live and in horror as the second plane hit the second tower 17 minutes after the first tower, and then it was confirmed that it was an act of evil and terrorism. Thus, the ultimate second witness sign, which the Bible says is required to confirm a matter. And that's, by the way, what makes God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections true. That's being explained on this channel. It's these second and third and multiple witnesses confirming matters. Otherwise, these connections are just arbitrary and a product of one's creative imagination. And this is why, for example, Don Shula died at the age of 90, and there's a pairing of 9 and 17, and then it's 90 days to the Dragon crew sign, which is also a pairing of 9 and 17, as I just explained, which is in turn 90 days to the day that Sean Connery died at the age of 90, who starred in the movie Rock, and then it was 220 days, which symbolizes Rock, to the day that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash, and thus really commencing the end times period before the return of the Rock, Lord Jesus Christ, at the end of the end times period in the autumn of 2024. We have another third witness or another witness confirming all of this, and that is that it is exactly 400 days for this time span, this trail of signs, and the number 400 symbolizes the Antichrist. Because Pharaoh in Egypt, a type for the Antichrist, persecuted the Hebrews for 400 years. Another confirmation of this, by the way, is that this death of Don Shula at the age of 90 days before the Dragon crew, was also nine months exactly after the birthday of Barack Obama in 2019, the 44th president, on the day of the Indonesian blackout in Jakarta, where Obama grew up, that incurred 4 deaths. There was 4 deaths on the birthday of the 44th president,
And that connects with other signs because, well, God's big picture of signs is an interconnected web. And when you try to explain it, you end up pulling the entire web, just explaining a little bit of it. But that, in turn, Obama's birthday was another 9 months after a football sign, which is why I'm explaining this, because it connects with Don Shula, the NFL coach. That 4th of the month date was November 4th, 2018, and that was the day of week 9 in the NFL schedule when the New England Patriots, the most important sports team in God's signs, played the Packers, and the game was touted as the GOAT versus greatness. GOAT is Antichrist symbolism, and there's lots more to that. I won't go off onto the tangent, but the score was 31-17, and that's a pairing of 9 and 17 because it was week 9. And the reason for the 31 is because God is pointing to Isaiah chapter 31, which describes the Antichrist being vanquished at the end of the end times period. And so we have these signs with 31, 9, and 17. For example, this most recent Super Bowl, which was the 7th win out of 10 Super Bowls for Tom Brady, which hinted at the number 17 because the Antichrist is symbolized by the number 17 because the Antichrist will be vanquished on the Temple Mount on the 10th day of the 7th month, which hints at the number 17, and the beast and the dragon in the book of Revelation, which are symbolism for the Antichrist, has 10 heads and 7 horns, which also hints at the number 17.
In ancient Israel, the Jews would conduct a ritual sacrifice involving a goat on the Temple Mount on the Day of Atonement.
So anyway, this was the GOAT Super Bowl, and it hinted at the number 17, but the score was 31-9, which is another pairing of 31, 9, and 17. There was also the duck boat tragedy with 31 people on board, 17 drowned, and 9 of them were from the same family, and that was on the prophetic Table Rock Lake. Speaking of rock. But that's another amazing sign that is explained in other videos too.
By the way, on the Day of Atonement in ancient Israel, the Jews would use goats in the ritual, as described in Leviticus chapter 23. And goat is Antichrist symbolism, and that's hinting at the 2 Antichrist goats and the Antichrist goat that will be vanquished from the Temple Mount at the return of Lord Jesus Christ in 2024 on the Day of Atonement. And so anyway, the reason for these signs involving the number 31, 17, and 9 is because God is communicating that the Antichrist described in Isaiah chapter 31 that is vanquished from the Temple Mount at the end of that chapter is revealed through the numbers 9 and 17. And that is Barack Obama, who was the president from 2009 until 2017 and was the senator from Illinois, arrived in Washington, D.C. in the 109th Congress and will return as the president in the 117th Congress. And a very big reason for going into all of this is that this chapter 31 in Isaiah begins with, "Woe to those who go down to Egypt." And again, in the Bible, Pharaoh in Egypt was a prophetic foreshadow or type for the Antichrist. And he persecuted the Jews in Egypt for 400 years. And so that's why from this game, this GOAT versus greatness game that Tom Brady played, that pointed to or had the combination of 31, 9, and 17 numbers, was exactly 9 months to the prophetic birthday of the 44th president, which in turn was 9 months to the death of Don Shula at the age of 90. So that brings us back to this diagram here. And then we have, from the death of Don Shula, we have 400 days. And so that's confirmed anyways. That's my point, is that this death of Don Shula ties back to the Egyptian symbolism on the 4th of November in 2018. And then we have this here, 400 days Egyptian Antichrist symbolism to this very important prophetic Kamala Harris plane crash sign that's leading to the death of, to the day of, that she will die in a plane crash. And actually, since I went into all of that, I need to follow it up with this. The big reason for Don Shula here too is that, as I was explaining, his team in 1973 was the only team to ever go undefeated, and then they visited Barack Obama at the White House after Obama's '85 Bears visited the White House. And the reason why they visited the White House is because that was the year that Obama moved to Chicago and began this 30-year cycle in which all of the major sports teams from Chicago won their championship, culminating with the Chicago Cubs breaking the curse of the Billy Goat. And they visited Obama, the 44th president, 4 days before he left office. So it was this complete 30-year cycle. And the 30 years is in the Bible symbolizing a king, in this case, the Antichrist king. Well, anyway, Don Shula was the coach of the Dolphins in the '85 Bears season, in the game, which was the only game that the Bears lost, and preventing them from also having an undefeated season. And at the time, I was a Dolphins fan as a kid, and I recorded this game, and I didn't record anything else on the VCR. I just happened to record that game. And so that's a personal story, but I think it was all meant to be that that this was the case, because it provided all of this understanding that I'm about to explain. But this was in week 13. From the Bible, the number 13 symbolizes the Antichrist. As Nimrod, a type for the Antichrist, was the 13th generation from Ham. Haman, another type for the Antichrist, persecuted the Jews on the 13th days of the months. And the two Antichrists described in the book of Revelation are described in Revelation chapter 13. And so number 13 symbolizes the Antichrist. And this game that the Dolphins defeated the Bears in was the only game that they lost in that season, a Monday night nationally televised game. It was week number 13, and the reason why they were able to defeat the Bears, which were unstoppable that year, and there's more to say about that. In fact, they were unstoppable because of their famous 46 defense. That was the title of their defense, and that's hinting at the 46th president through which the Antichrist will come to power. But they were unstoppable, but the only player that was able to stop them was the quick performing, pass-throwing quarterback for the Dolphins, player number 13. And in the season that the Dolphins won without losing a game, the Super Bowl, the MVP player was player number 13. And this was exceptional because this was a special teams player. It wasn't a position of football that normally you would even consider being an MVP player. But he was player number 13, and that he stood out because of his position as well. And then it was exactly 13 years after that, the Super Bowl, that the Bears won the 46 defense. So all of these 13s. Well, the day that the Chicago Bears visited Obama at the White House, I've given you the background now for how extremely prophetic the '85 Bears were. I'm probably forgetting some points, but the day they visited the White House was October 7th, which is 10/7. And God has used this date in other signs too, as second and third witnesses, confirming that this date symbolizes the Day of Atonement, which in the Hebrew calendar is the 10th day of the 7th month. Well, it just so happens that this 10/7 date in 2011 was the Day of Atonement in the Hebrew calendar. Not only was it 10/7 in the Gregorian calendar, which symbolizes the Day of Atonement, but it was also the Day of Atonement in the Hebrew calendar. And this day was exactly 13 years before the Day of Atonement in 2024, and the day that Barack Obama, the Antichrist, the goat Antichrist, will be vanquished from the Temple Mount at the return of Lord Jesus Christ on the day of the Lord in 2024 at his second coming. And so this was the big reason. All of this was confirmation that the second coming is in 2024. And so that's the reason for going into all of this. And that is the prophetic reason for the death of Don Shula at the age of 90 in this diagram. And so I'm glad I went into that to give you more understanding as to how important the death of Don Shula is and why it's all connecting here.
All right. Well, one last thing in this video. When Kamala Harris dies, she will be replaced by the Antichrist, Barack Obama, who will overcome the 22nd Amendment, which restricts someone from being elected more than twice. He will be appointed instead, through the 25th Amendment, he will be appointed vice president. And that's why it is exactly 25 years. Well, also the number 25 symbolizes the Jewish temple and the Temple Mount, which Bible prophecy says the Antichrist will rule in the end times period. And this is why exactly 25 years back from the day that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash was the release date of the movie The Rock in 1996, which is amazing. And that was just a few days, 7 days, after the movie Dragonheart was released. So that's quite a coincidence right there. The Rock and the Dragonheart, these two movies that tie in right here, were actually coincidentally released at the same time, 25 years before.
And then 220 days, which symbolizes rock,
Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash. It's beautiful.
Aliens and UFOs are demons masquerading as aliens and UFOs for the gullible that will believe it because they don't have a solid biblical worldview. Most people's spiritual experiences are demonic deception, especially if they are not a true follower of Christ. The New Age or New Spirituality or Consciousness religion is evil deception from Satan. Satan and demons will give Catholics and New Agers spiritual experiences that they think confirm for them their beliefs, but these spiritual experiences are demonic deception for those that refuse to love the truth and so be saved. There is a spiritual reality behind the material world that we see. The wages for sin is death. Sin means to miss the mark. No one is good, all have sinned. Because of sin, people are captives of the ruler of this world, Satan. People's souls belong to Satan, whose power over people is death. God took the form of a man, Jesus Christ, and paid the ransom that is owed to the ruler of this world. Through Christ's death and resurrection, he defeated sin and he overcame Satan's power in death. It is through Christ and his Spirit that it is possible for everyone to be forgiven of their sin, and we can have eternal life if we choose it. We can choose to follow Jesus out of captivity from sin and Satan, or we can choose to reject this and remain a slave to this world, sin, and to Satan. If one rejects Jesus Christ, after they die, they will pay the price for their sin in hell, and then they will die the second death, and their soul will cease to exist. Believing in Christ means much more than simple intellectual agreement. It means to repent of sin and completely commit one's life and become a willing slave to Jesus and his kingdom. Jesus said we need to be born again, which implies a death of the self and a death to this world. Believing in Jesus implies living out one's faith through taking action that typically involves risk and sacrifice. This demonstration of faith through action is what it means to have faith and to believe in Jesus. Some Christians will tell you otherwise, but they are deceived and they ignore countless passages in the Bible. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. It is essential that everyone immediately read the homepage of my website, TrumpPrediction.com. If you are a Christian, once this prediction has come to pass, you should know that you are obligated to share the video that you are currently watching and to share the videos on this channel and to not ever stop sharing this video. The price you must pay for having learned this precious knowledge is to work towards letting others know about this information. And unless you are completely consumed with another ministry or have a health condition, you should know that you are obligated on a daily basis to hand out flyers that promote this video channel on street corners, car windshields, in busy parking lots, in mailboxes, or if anything, as you come across people in your daily life. For example, in the bank or in the aisles of the supermarket as you are shopping. If you are shy, you need to overcome this. Courage isn't a lack of fear, it is action in spite of it. Please contact me for the PDF file for the flyer. The main reason why many people will not agree with this statement that a Christian is obligated to work to get the news out to the world about this prediction is the bad Nicolaitan theology and doctrine that the vast majority of, quote, Christians, unquote, have, which is why the modern church, including and especially the evangelical church, is the lukewarm, stagnant church of Laodicea. And the very purpose of this prediction is to prove to these quote-unquote Christians that they have the Nicolaitan doctrine that Jesus said he hates and is coming to make war on with the sword of his mouth. Most quote-unquote Christians don't fear God, and they don't really get the Bible. And this is the primary reason and purpose for the end times period of the Antichrist. In short, it's time for those that have barely been doing anything for the kingdom to finally make some serious sacrifices that will cost them, and to do some serious work, and to use their bags of gold and produce some fruit before they are thrown into the fire. When this prediction has come to pass, it will be a very, very big bag of gold. I encourage you to use it.